Let me see here. Okay, and we're live.
Hello,
Uh, th- Hi, this is Deacon Joseph Swaden,
it's Fisher Venick.
and here we are again for yet another finale for Orthodox Apologetics Live. We'll start with talking about the channel, the new channel. We've been trying to set that up. I have. It has been tricky for some reason. I can't seem to get the YouTube account to work the way I need it to, so that I can broadcast and we can switch over to the more general NFTU news program, which will still include apologetics in it. But in any case, that has been the tricky part of getting that working. So we're still here. And one of the things that I did want to address, because in the past week or so, I'm not kidding, Ludika, I've gotten like for 3 or 4 comments, a couple of emails through NFTU, mind you, asking about Elijah Yasi. For those who don't know, Elijah Yasi is one of the Roman Catholic hosts on Reason and Theology. He hosts some program called like Underground Catholicism, and basically, I guess I always refer to him kind of, how like Reason and Theology has like a bunch of rotating kind of hosts, like Michael Lofton's like the main person, and then you have like Eric occasionally most of the time, and the other guy Albrecht, it's so on and so forth. There's like a little rotating stable, and like Elijah's kind of like like second string, like on a team. You know what I'm saying? Like he comes in when there's like like fewer people to talk to, I guess. But in any case, I guess he like started doing reviews of this of Ubi Petrus's stuff, and Ubi Petrus, very interesting if polarizing figure. But in any case, we're not him. So I don't want to answer on his behalf. But the point is, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I'd first off, I'd be open to a debate challenge with him. If that was even his interest, and I don't think it is, because if it was, he would have invited himself. I've only shared a screen with him once, and that was during a Fatima roundtable, which he didn't say much in. But the point is, I mean, we have no problem with issuing a challenge. If Elijah wants to come on here and argue, we'd be glad to have him. Vladika Enoch, I'm sure you'd be glad to moderate. I have no problem, or I'll be glad to moderate. Whoever wants to take it, because we'll take anyone. I mean, the point is, so that's something that has been a concern, because people, for some reason, I guess they're finding some of his arguments convincing. When I was listening earlier, I felt like some of the things were cribbed off stuff we say, even though Roman Catholics don't really do that sort of apologetic. Roman Catholic apologists, I should say, like Roman Catholic scholars often do, but they often sound weird in comparison to Roman Catholic apologists. So that's that has been a main focus of mine in this. So we are going to eventually move to NFTU News if I can ever get it to work. In YouTube, it says it's verified, and hopefully I will be able to do that. But until that happens, I think we're kind of stuck here, and I'm hoping that we don't have like finale part 10 before we move over. That would not be good. So that's what I've got so far. Vlika Enoch, you haven't been on in a while. How are things going?
Oh, I'm fine. Everything's going all right.
Going into the Apostles Fast.
Yes, this Monday.
Yep. Oh boy. But anyway, let's see here. Now you had sent me an interesting article that was on the main website. I mean, it was on the main page of the Moscow Patriarchate. I'm actually just going to put it on the screen. Give me just a second, because I thought it was odd. And we both thought it was odd, but let's see here. Hold on. Let me go here. Let me close this. I started doing a little bit of unnecessary research there. And no, that's NFTU. That's definitely not my. What the heck? Hold on one moment, please. Okay, so let me share the screen real quick. And As you can see, this is, let me go all the way back. This is the Russian Orthodox Church's Department for External Church Relations. But basically, this was like kind of like the ecumenism office of the Moscow Patriarchate. Now it acts kind of like more like a diplomatic office of some kind. But as we can see here, that's what we have here is the first page. I guess this was a month ago it was written, or just going on 2. How the Greek Old Calendarists became radicalized and what the results has been. And so, in any case, I figured we could talk about that and get some kind of, I wanted to get your insights on this because it is an interesting thing that, this many years in and now in the middle of their own Constantinople-Moscow schism, they're talking about the Greek Old Calendarists. What are your thoughts?
Well, why don't you read one of the paragraphs or 2, and then we'll discuss it. It's not very long. It's all basically a page or so.
And for the most part, I will say, this is a fantastic article all the way up to the end. And then the end, it's kind of like it gets soft.
I don't know if fantastic would be correct, but anyway,
I'll put it this way:
go through it.
Outside of the fact that they labeled Cyprian of Philly with metropolitan something of
just go ahead read through some of it.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, it's by Athanasius Zoitakis, candidate of historical science, lecturer at the Department of Church History, History Faculty of Moscow State University. In November 1922, Stylianos Gonatas became the Prime Minister of Greece. A liberal politician, he was a consistent supporter of the modernization and westernization of Greece. In particular, he believed the renunciation of the Julian calendar would bring Greece closer to Europe, which had long gone over to the new style.
Yes, this is also happening at the same moment when the monarchy is being overthrown.
Right.
I mean, not the monarchy, but they got rid of the king, and they put his brother on the throne or something like that. And they also got rid of a lot of members of the Greek Holy Synod. And because there's also, remember, these are Venezuela's type figures who was kind of a Masonic liberal. Anyway, go ahead.
In 1923, the leadership of the church changed. With the support of the authorities, the renowned scholar Chrysostomus I Papadopoulos became the primate of the Greek church. Many considered his election to be uncanonical with reference to the 30th Apostolic Canon, which stated if any bishop obtained possession of a church by the aid of the temporal powers, let him be deposed and excommunicated. Now, that actually, I did not actually know that was even an argument, because I thought that really, it's an interesting thing, but it's that they pointed that out. But on December 27th, 1923, Archbishop Chrysostomus issued a decree of the transfer of the Church of Greece to the new style. He would subsequently regret his decision. He motivated his fatal step by claiming he had been pressured by the secular authorities and the Patriarch of Constantinople, Meletius Metaxakis. In vain did I do this, that accursed Meletius had me by the throat.
It's interesting.
I never heard that before, and that's
I've read that before.
That he had him by the. First off, I did not. I figured there was pressure, but I had no idea he ever expressed regrets or anything like that. So that's it.
Well, at the end of his career, he might have felt it was after all the controversy. But all right, continue.
Most of the clergy submitted to the innovation, but the people came with processions of the cross out into the main squares of the cities, calling upon the authorities to cancel this innovation. For this, people were arrested, beaten up, and even tortured.
That's true.
In spite of the repressions, many continued to campaign openly for the retention of the ancient Julian calendar, Old Style, which led to a church schism and the setting up of the so-called True Orthodox Church, Old Calendarist. At first, the Old Calendarist movement was spontaneous from 1924 to 1935, but the number of faithful to remain true to the Julian calendar were few. For the first 6 months of its existence, not a single priest took part in the movement, but then there appeared 2 such clerics. I don't know that that's totally accurate. Because I'm pretty sure there were Athonite fathers who would go down and serve the people.
Yeah, I think you're accurate. I think you're right.
Yeah, that I think is I think that I don't blame the author. I can see how they might get that impression if there are no bishops.
Yeah, but this is a Greek author who wrote this, by the way.
But he's a Greek author living in Russia. So that's an interesting.
They obviously don't know where they could have looked.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, go ahead.
I mean, it's a it's a meager representation. Obviously,
I'm more interested in why they put it up, but we want to go. We're almost finished. So go ahead.
The well-known incident of the appearance of the sign of the cross in the sky during the all-night vigil before the feast of the exaltation of the precious cross, according to the Julian calendar, in 1925 over the small old calendarist church of St. John the Theologian in Athens, led to an increase in the number of adherents to the old style. The cross could be observed by both the faithful and the police, who had been sent up to break up the prayer meeting for a full hour. From 1925 to 1935, there were founded about 800 old calendar parishes, and periodicals began to be published. In 1931, a parliamentary law temporarily allowed the old calendarists to gather freely for liturgical worship. The official church actively opposed this, and as a result, old calendar churches were closed and their monks and nuns were expelled from monasteries. There's a picture of the sign of the cross in the sky there. At first, the movement had no bishops of its own, but by 1935, 11 bishops were already sympathetic to the idea of going over to the old style. Under pressure from the Greek church, only 3 bishops carried their decision into effect, who then began to consecrate other bishops. The movement was led by the Metropolitan of Florina, Chrysostomos Kavaridis. Initially, the aim of the movement was not to set up a new church. Its participants merely wanted to somewhat influence the official Church of Greece through the position they had taken. They originally recognized the sacraments of the new calendarists.
All right. Technically, Metropolitan Germanus was the first hierarch, but I think they're trying to say Chrysostomos was like the ideological figure behind it.
I feel like a lot of the
they're glossing over a lot of stuff too.
That's an honest mistake, because even a lot of the literature that comes out of the true Orthodox focuses primarily on Metropolitan Chrysostomos. You would be forgiven for thinking that Metropolitan Chrysostomos was in fact the leader, because when you read our documents, Metropolitan Germanus is almost never mentioned, mostly because, if I remember correctly, he's in prison a lot. But in any case,
and he was second in the rank in the Greek church hierarchy.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now they also are going to jump around in a lot of these points. Okay, but anyway, go ahead, continue.
All right, hold on one moment. After the Second World War, the influence of the old calendar.
Wait. Also, I'm not really sure if it's correct where they say initially the aim of the movement was not to set up a new church. Its participants merely wanted to influence the official Church of Greece through because remember, this is a whole controversy about the 1935 or 36 confession.
No, not 1935.
1935 confession about whether they received the new calendars by chrismation or not. Right. So.
No, I don't even think chrismation was on the table. It was a question of baptisms and weddings, and that was partially a response to the fact that the new calendarists had already started. I think it was in like 1931 or something, saying that all the baptisms and weddings of the old calendars.
I know, but I'm saying it's not true that it merely wanted to influence the official Church of Greece.
Right. No, that would be
more. It's more complicated than that.
It is a complicated situation, but there were adherents to that position.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Continue.
After the Second World War, the influence of the old calendarists grew. They enjoyed the support of conservative political circles, and well-known monarchist politicians regularly participated in events organized by the true Orthodox Christians. The Church of Greece voiced its protest against this and called upon the Greek Church to chop down the old calendarist rebellion at its root. In spite of repression enacted by the state, the schismatics continued to gain popularity among the people.
Now, something important to note is in 1935, I believe, was also the year that the liberal government fell. Have some impression about that. I'm sorry, it's very late, so I'm tired. But and that was one of the reasons the 3 bishops took over the leaderships of the genuine Orthodox church, because they felt that the government now would be more friendly to them, and it kind of was. It wasn't just shooting them, I guess.
Yeah, it's worth noting again that we're not just randomly talking about this. It showed up on the Moscow Patriarchate's Department of External Relations website. It's on their front page, mospet.ru. You can see it in English.
They also bring up in the next article the whole murder nun issue, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm still not sure on her. I really want to contact some people in the Matthewites to get a better idea of her life, because I have a very strong feeling they were really just.
Yeah, it's very odd, because you would have thought Hockna or somebody would have talked about this, and I'm very surprised there wasn't suddenly
it's just spectacularly appearing like 3 years.
I mean, you can find articles going back to the 50s, but they're always kind of contradictory about things.
Yeah. And
who knows? Maybe there was a crazy person, but then again,
Well, it's possible both can be true. That there was a crazy person, but she might not have been a murderer, and she might have been a frame up by the state.
Yeah. Okay. Continue reading.
Okay. The old calendar's reputation suffered greatly when in 1952 reports of torture in one of their monasteries appeared. This would be the situation we were just talking about.
That's not that's the Matthewite monastery.
Right. It's the Matthewite monastery. Yep. But the main problem for the old calendars were internal conflicts and the radicalization of the movement. In 1937, a group of extremists headed by Bishop Matthew Carpathakis broke away from the Synod of Metropolitan Chrysostomus. Matthew, in contravention of the holy canons, had consecrated a bishop unilaterally. This group refused to recognize the presence of grace in the sacraments of the official church, as well as other schismatic groups.
Now, again, this is how it's presented is like he consecrated a bishop, and that's why he broke away. It's
oversimplification. Because
the oversimplification is creating problems in perception, though. That's my point.
Yeah, and that's true. But okay, so we
now technically Metropolitan Germanus had also broken it away from him and Chrysostomus had separated because Germanus did not like the position of Chrysostomus. All right.
Well, and it's important to recognize
that Chrysostomus himself, whatever you want to think, he actually on several occasions said, "Well, I retract my previous position." Anyway, so
okay. One thing that should be kept in mind is that if you had Germanos in jail, Chrysostomus wasn't even in communion with him at the time, and Bishop Matthew was alone. There were no bishops left.
No, they had remember they had consecrated like 4 or 5 other bishops.
I don't remember that, but okay,
because there was
we're talking about like 1952. Because by the time Bishop Matthew died, by the time Bishop Chrysostomus died, there were no bishops left.
I'm talking about like 1937. That's what I'm.
Oh no, we're already in 1950s here.
See, this is my point. The beginning of the article is 1952. Then in the middle of the paragraph, it goes down to 1937. So, and then they don't even mention that the single hand consecration happened in 1948.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, go ahead. Maybe it's just because we know more about the history, so we're more explicit. Okay, go ahead. Continue reading.
Yeah, I mean, after the death of Chrysostomus in 1955, this branch of the old Calendrus was left without a bishop. And then they participated in the consecration of 2 of its bishops without the knowledge and permission of the Permanent Synod, 2 bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. The Synod of the Rokor recognized these consecrations only in 1969 and declared the liturgical communion with the followers of the old style. But this communion was later broken off by the Rokor and then restored, but this time with another group of old calendarists, the Cyprianites. In the period from 1980 to 1990, the Greek Old Calendarist movement endured a time of internal disputes, discord, divisions, and the formation of new synods. The leading role was played by representatives of the radical wing, headed by the Matthewites, who completely rejected the presence of grace in the local Orthodox churches. A more moderate position, but also with a negative attitude towards the presence of grace in the official church, was that of the Synod of Archbishop Auxentius.
No, I'm not sure of what leading role they're talking about. The Matthewites are like 5%, 8% of those who would have been called
the overwhelming majority of the old calendarists at this point would have been under Archbishop Auxentius. And although there would have been a substantial group that broke away with the Callisto schism, which he doesn't even discuss. Like, he starts talking about the Cyprianite jurisdiction, but you have to know about the Callisto schism to understand where they even came from.
Okay, next paragraph.
Okay, so a third group was organized in 1985 by the Metropolitan of Oropos and Philly Cyprian and the Metropolitan of Sardis, John. This is very tragic that they wrote Metropolitan of Gortina, Timothy. That's actually Metropolitan Cyprian of Philly. They hold to the opinion that there is, of course, grace present in the official Church of Greece, but our body has been incapacitated by the heresy of ecumenism and modernism. This is why they reject the communion with the official church, but at the same time, they do not claim that they are the sole true church in the land of Greece. For these views, the more radical old calendarists call them ecumenists and traitors. This is odd because this was written in May, and they've been like part of the Synod of Archbishop Kallinikos for like a decade. So, I mean, there hasn't.
Well, we just continue reading. Oh, there's more.
Okay. As a result of the very stringent position of the radical groupings among the Greek Old Calendarists, all the Old Calendarist movement on the whole remains compromised. By its, quote, zeal, not according to knowledge, they have laid a foundation for criticizing all opponents of ecumenism. If we classify the Old Calendarists according to groupings, then we observe an interesting peculiarity that we can ascribe to each of the 3 groups, not one but several synods. At times there have been between 10 and 12. The Zealot schism on Mount Athos. The decision to go over the new style was provoked by the schism on the holy mountain of Athos. And then it says, hold on. I cannot find it. I just lost
This is the
my
calendar reform. This is the calendar reform begun in 1923.
Yeah, the calendar reform begun in 1923 by the Patriarch of Constantinople was supported by only one Athonite monastery, that of Vatapedi, but in time it rejected the reform. The Athonite monasteries took the conciliar decision to retain the old style, while at the same time they did not break communion with Constantinople. This decision did not satisfy the radicals who then formed the Zealot movement. The state authorities began to persecute the rebels. The Zealots were expelled from the Holy Mountain and their cells handed over to new inmates. Nevertheless, there are many on Athos to this day who refuse to commemorate the ecumenical patriarch. In particular, they control the monastery of Esphigmenou.
Now, I'm not too clear. It was my perception that a lot of the monasteries weren't commemorating the patriarch until like the 40s or 50s or something like that, into the new Holy Mountain Fathers.
The new Holy Mountain Fathers was actually from the 70s.
Okay.
So yeah, Athos actually rejected communion with the ecumenical patriarch until then. The new Holy Mountain Fathers then would take over, and eventually it was just left to Esphigmenou, which continues to refuse to commemorate, and who they keep getting mistreated by the state authorities. But and that's not even discussing the Skeets. If we're discussing the Skeets, there are more other monasteries that do the same.
And remember, there's Prophet Elias Skeet that the Rokwa ran, and the Greek police beat him up and chased him off in '94.
Yeah, and there's the point is that there's always been sympathy for Esphigmenou among even other monasteries there, because they know what pressures the government is placing on them, and they refuse to back down.
Okay. Continue.
So why did the old calendarist movement fail to become a mass movement? We can answer this question by turning to the legacy of the Greek ascetics of piety who are well known in Russia. Most of them did not support the transfer to the new style and spoke out against ecumenism, but did not separate from the church, believing that schism was a far greater calamity. We can find out about these lesser-known pages of history by turning to the legacy of the abbot of the monastery of Longovardos on the island of Paros, Archimandrite Philotheos Zervacos, a renowned Greek father, confessor, missionary, and theologian. Father Philotheos enjoyed great authority. He corresponded with the patriarchs of Constantinople, Meletius and Athenagoras, the primates of many local Orthodox churches, the prime ministers and presidents of Greece, and leaders of the old calendarist movements. The documents which we publish in this article have hitherto been unfamiliar to the Russian reader. Zervacos believed it was essential to observe firmly and with reverence the decisions of the councils and holy tradition. Any distortions in the sphere of dogma were inadmissible. In the sphere of canons, economy was possible, but even here it was preferable to adhere to strictness. Akrivea. Archimandrite Philotheos recognized the authority of the church authorities and treated the hierarchy with respect, but critically reacted to any distortion of church tradition, even the most insignificant. Father Philotheos perceived negatively the change in the church calendar. He supported the position of the patriarchs of Alexandria and Antioch, who in 1923 insisted on the convocation of a council to settle the calendar issue. At the time, it has to be noted that the Patriarch of Jerusalem was principally opposed to changes in the calendar. Let us take a look at this unpublished letter by Father Philotheos on the 11th of February 1932, of which he speaks of the steps he will take to defend the old style. I asked the ever-memorable patriarchs of Jerusalem and Alexandria, who rejected the calendar innovations, and they said to me, "If you are permitted to keep the old style, that is good. If they threaten or they want to dissolve the monastery, then agree to the new calendar, as this is not a question of dogma. The elders of Athos and my spiritual advisor advised me to do the same." Subsequently, Zervacos did not give up, and for many years continued to fight for a return to the old style. On the 20th of February 1935, he sent a letter to the Greek Prime Minister Panayotis Saldaris asking him to enable to return to the old style. And it has been 10 years now that the Church of Greece has been in a state of division over the liturgical calendar. I ask you as the ruler of this homeland to ensure that this schism does not become irreversible. Unite the Church, which has so been divided by folly. Return the Church calendar, which has been handed down to us as our legacy by our God-bearing fathers. In the letter to his head of state, Father Zervacos proposed a compromise: the consecration of an archbishop who would serve on the old calendar while at the same time remaining within canonical submission to the Church of Greece. In this way, the old calendars would receive a canonical pastor and their conscience would be pacified. Archimandrite Philotheos himself continued to serve according to the old calendar right up until January of 1976. The straw that broke the camel's back was when he got a hold of a book published by abbess of the old calendarist convent of the Lord's Ascension in the town of Gosani by the nun Magdalena. Magdalena's book, entitled Nectarios Catholicos, Iconoclast, Latinist, and Ecumenist, contained absurd and base accusations laid against the great Greek saint Nectarios of Pentapolis. Philotheos Zervacos attempted to call the nun to repentance and published a book refuting her fantasies. He concluded that it was impossible to be reconciled with the radical schismatics. Archimandrite Philotheos no longer wished to serve on the same calendar as those who believe that the old calendar is the only way to paradise, while the adherents of the new calendar are on the path of eternal destruction. Quote, the old calendarists, in order to retain their calendar, have fallen into many errors worse than the new calendarists. They have done away with the first and most important commandment of love. They have divided themselves up into numerous groups. They have begun to rebaptize Orthodox Christians. They have introduced new dogmas and began to worship their calendar. The fanatical zealots believe that the sacraments are invalid and the Holy Spirit does not descend upon the new calendarists. When looking at the terrible errors of the old calendarists, many have chosen the lesser evil and have gone over to the new calendar.
Notice there are a lot of ellipses, but continue.
Okay. Do you have a full copy of this letter?
I think I've read a version of it. We're going to get to after you finish reading this next paragraph. We're going to read something from Kavarnos, who knew actually Philotheos Zervacos, and he's going to contradict some of this stuff.
Okay, well, that's useful. Father Philotheos was obliged to take the decision to go over the new calendar. It has to be said this was not an easy decision for him after many months of fervent prayer and fasting by the constant schisms among the old calendarists. They anathematized each other and rebaptized new adherents who came over to them. Moreover, many bishops were self-consecrated. That is, they're consecrated.
Completely lie.
That's just wrong.
It's so stupid. Okay, if you look in the private chat, I sent you the link to the Orthodox info.
Hold on.
Site.
Give me a moment. Let me find it.
It's from an interview with Dr. Constantine Kavarnos.
Okay,
I mean, I'm not endorsing Philotheos, whatever. I'm just saying some of this stuff is not accurate.
Well, I mean, the thing with I heard about the book about Saint Nectarios, and that is insane because I don't know any old calendarist, serious old calendarist who.
Sure, I mean, people write crazy things and it's bad. I know I don't endorse that, obviously.
All right, so let's here. I'm going to switch this screen over, and you can read this because my throat's a little tired. Give me just one moment while I switch the screen. I'm going to stop that screen, and I'm going to switch to the other screen as soon as I get to it.
Now, because I noticed they say he decided before he died to switch to using the new calendar. All right, I mean, just scroll to the bottom.
Okay, just let me know where.
Keep on going. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
It's from an interview with Dr. Kavarnos, Constantine Kavarnos, and originally they were talking about Photius Kontaglu. But the interviewer says, why do you think that Philotheos Zervacos and Photius Kontaglu sided with the so-called... Look, I'm sorry, go down further.
It doesn't go down.
All right, okay, all right, that's fine. I'll just read the answer. It says, I explain, Kavarnos says, I explained this in volume 11 of my series, Modern Orthodox Saints, which is devoted to Blessed Philotheos Zervacos. From the very time the idea of introducing the new calendar was conceived, Philotheos protested. Okay. If you go further down, it says, and did Photius Kontaglu, it says his senior, I lost my place. The prophecy of Zervacos was completely filled. In his later years, when he saw that the Greek government, the Church of Greece, and the Patriarchate did not listen to him, he thought about simply returning his monastery to the old calendar. So, technically, the monastery did not, to begin with, during this period, wasn't using the old calendar. All right? So there was no question of him, he decides now to use the new calendar. Okay, so the monastery was already technically following the the new calendar already. All right, so they're acting as if he had some kind of dramatic change. On this matter, I suggest a careful reading of my book on Blessed Father Philotheos. His senior monk, Father Leontios, whom I happened to meet a few years before he died, said that Father Philotheos was very determined to declare that the monastery had returned to the old calendar, but he was opposed by some of his senior monks, particularly Father Leontios. Every time the elder left the monastery to travel as a confessor, sometimes for weeks, Leontios was the acting abbot. So he had a strong voice. He emphasized that if they changed the monastery to the old calendar, then the local bishop would immediately step in and force them to give up that idea, or else. The or else would be that the police would be sent over to expel the monks and say this monastery belongs to the local bishop of Peros Naxos. Father Philotheos was close to the century mark, so he was almost 100, and Father Leontios was about the same age, and they pictured themselves being thrown out of the monastery. It would have been a very tragic situation. So what Father Philotheos did was to die on the old calendar. He invited a confessor from Mount Athos, where the old calendar was followed, to serve for his last confession and to bury him. So he didn't like people saying things, attacking St. Nectarios and all this other stuff. But there was
Which
no
is totally justified.
Yeah, there was no, my monastery is following the old calendar, and now I'm going to change the new calendar because I'm upset about what the old calendars are saying. The monastery was on the new calendar. He didn't like it, but they were afraid of being kicked out of the monastery at the age of 100 and dying on the road. So this is not,
That's a valid concern.
Kind of their explanation on the MP site is not exactly
The most accurate.
It's not accurate. Okay, but whether you like Philotheos Zervacos or not, there's a lot that hasn't been said. Okay, but continue reading the original article.
Okay, hold on one moment. Okay, so we go back to the original article. It's on mospat.ru.
Yep.
Just so we can, if you just tuned in, this is on the Moscow Patriarchate's Department of External Relations website. It is on the front page right now because I guess it only came out last month. And again, we are still confused as to the interest in the old calendars here, but let us go down here and let me begin streaming that again. And so, hold on a moment. Okay, and let's see here. I picked the wrong one. Okay, so
it says, today the Church of Greece is not taking any serious measures to heal the schism, it says. This is because any attempt to become closer to the radical schismatics is hardly possible, as they reject the presence of grace in the sacraments of all the local Orthodox churches. Whether the return of moderate schismatics to the bosom of the church will ever happen is a question open to discussion. Now, who these people are they're talking about, the moderate schismatics, they don't explain. They don't seem to have much familiarity with the situation.
Yeah, well, I think that, and this is one of the things that I thought was very interesting. That
or they
I
do
remember,
have familiarity, but there's something else happening.
No, I think it's a lack of familiarity, because I remember when I forget who it was. I know it was a Rokor priest who was telling me that he had visited Russia. This was way back when. This was I think 2000 or something. And he said he would talk to priests right after the fall of communism. And some of these MP priests would be like, well, ask for a blessing from Metropolitan Anastasi for me. Not realizing that Metropolitan Anastasi by the 1990s had been long gone, and they had gone through two other first hierarchs since then. So it is very probable that their information is from books from the 1990s, and they have no idea what's going on right now. So that, it could be more sinister than that. It could be.
You don't have to read the rest of it if you don't want it. It's not really much important information, but
it's up to you.
People can if they want to. It's interesting that this would even appear on an official MP site. There were articles kind of like this on the Union of Orthodox Journalists site, which is kind of pro MP Ukrainian site.
Right. Yeah, but that's
remember there was Metropolitan. I think Anthony was a Ukrainian MP Metropolitan saying stuff like, "Well, we need to contact the old calendarists, and if the Greek Church isn't going to consent to this and this." So it's very odd. My theory, since 2017 or 18, whenever this stuff began, is that this is kind of the veiled, kind of a diplomacy of veiled threats. All right.
Okay.
So, they can start talking about, because if you look at the last paragraph, I know we said we're not going to read it anymore, but the last paragraph is like, well, old grievances can be put aside, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing, Union Orthodox Journalist articles were a little bit more pro old calendarists, as much as you could even say for that, from the MP view. And I think what they're doing is they're hoping this will kind of scare people in Athens in the New Calendar Center to thinking, well, we better, back away from, the Ukrainian issue, or maybe the MP will recognize some old calendar group, which isn't really going to happen. Photius of Marathon, who's the head of, they're like the department of their version of foreign relations department for the Kalymnikos Synod, which is like half of the old calendarists, or 60% or whatever. He basically said something like, we're open to discussion, but not if the MP is part of the World Council of Churches, not if they're going to do this and this and this and this. That was as positive as they were going to be. All right. So
That's just my theory, that they're hoping they could find somebody to join them, or more likely, it's, again, my thinking is it's being used as a kind of a cudgel. But I just thought it was interesting because it's very rarely do you find the MP on any official site like this.
Well, one of the
saying
things
anything
that blows
about
my mind is that, the other things that we're discussing, like when they talked about negotiations with the old calendar groups, they were kind of buried in these like articles. This is like front page stuff now, which makes me wonder if this is a diplomacy of threats, or this is something else. And not that I'm not assuming the best intentions on the part of the patriarchate at all, but what I will say is maybe this is some sort of way to send out feelers, because they don't remember the history. Otherwise they'd realize that the Cyprianites don't exist anymore. Well, they kind of do. I mean, they still have the Diocese of Etna, and it operates kind of like semi. I think.
Remember, there is no necessary distinction or opposition between a veiled diplomacy of threats and feelers. They can do both.
That's true. They could be. You could, with one hand, be challenging Constantinople, and with the other hand,
you can have two plans. You can have a backup plan.
That's true.
But to be honest, they have to realize that this is not going to that no group in Greece is going to join the Moscow Patriarchate. It's just simply not going to happen. I mean, maybe some small group that's just made up a bunch of adventurers or something like that. But nobody is going to self-liquidate themselves and put themselves in the good graces of the MP. Because remember how they talked further up about a separate archbishop for the old calendarists or something like that.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting thing, because the one paragraph we didn't read was about Metropolitan Timothy of Gortyna, who was part of the Crete Archdiocese under the Ecumenical Patriarchate, who continually tried to negotiate with the old calendarists. So the point is, hold on. In the 16th century already. And so the point is that what's left out is that, I mean, even in 1988, for example, there were concelebrations between the Cyprianites and the Jerusalem Patriarchate. So the point, and that I'm talking at the level of patriarch. So the idea that there's there's this great gulf wasn't always the case at this period that they're talking about. So that's why I'm saying, if their information is so dated, they may well be thinking that there's a large contingent of old calendarists who would be willing to listen to them. And I mean, our synod experienced that with the Church of Georgia back in 1997 or something like that.
That was not 2000.
2000. Okay, so the point, the Milan Synod did, but in any case, the point is that they could be trying to, I guess you could say, one, make Constantinople uncomfortable, and two, trying to negotiate with other people. I don't know if I want to see the worst in them. I don't know if I can see the best in them.
If you look at other stuff on the mospat.ru or the patriarcha.ru site, anybody who is anti-ecumenist and anti-modernist, and you begin to look at these sites, you're going to see a lot of stuff that's not going to turn you off immediately. Remember, there was just recently, you have monasteries in the MP that, for example, the Abbot of Valon Monastery says all monks must take a vaccine, the COVID vaccine. If they aren't, they're kicked out of the monastery.
Well, that's true, but even at the patriarchal level, I know that Putin and the patriarch didn't take anything until Novavax came out. And I think Novavax is one of the only vaccines that's not based on fetal cells.
It's not the same as Sputnik.
No, Novavax is, I believe, Philippine. Actually, it's not Russian, which is ironic, because that means they didn't use their own national vaccine. They used another one, which I guess was better, but none of the people got it. So what are you going to do? It might be available for sale in Russia, though, because unlike here, they don't regulate drugs so heavily.
Well, anyway, I thought it was interesting to talk about that post on the MP site. Whatever. It's just a continuous kind of trend I've noticed, and who knows what will come of that. But,
Okay, well, there's some conversation about this, so we'll address a couple of the things, and then we'll the first thing is somebody is kind of simplifying here. Cult of Modernism says Rokor is like SSPX and the old calendars are like Ceres. Very crude analogy, but it gives you a sense.
Not anymore. Rokor is more like the FSSP because they're part of the patriarchate.
The biggest problem I have with all of these analogies is the fact that they tend to obscure Orthodox ecclesiology. Like, in other words, when your typical Roman Catholic asks who's the head of Orthodoxy, people will say things like, well, it's Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople. And it gives the misleading impression, one that the Patriarch himself would like to encourage, that he is some sort of Eastern Pope. And that's not how Orthodox ecclesiology works. Because the fullness of the Eucharistic communion is in the bishop. Even a single bishop who's not of a rank, a metropolitan or a patriarch, is still just a bishop. And so that concept isn't there, and it wasn't in Constantinople's thinking until fairly recently, probably the past 40 years or so. So that's one thing that I do want to make clear, is that we are not like Roman Catholics in that sense. We don't have a head. It's not so centralized. Kyle Marks asks, what was the whole thing on Yasi in this stream? Very simply, a number of people have been writing to us asking, to answer some of the claims of Elijah Yasi. To be honest with you, I had not seen much of his work, and I went to his website for the first time today. I felt that some of it is a little bit academically dishonest. I find it interesting that they kind of almost let me see if I can give you this example, because this is kind of just weird.
Just so we're clear, one of the problems with Novavax is that in the development of it, they tested it on HEK aborted fetal cells. So it was aborted fetal cells were used in the development process.
Okay. All right. So that's not good either.
No.
But I don't want to talk too much about the vaccine before this thing gets a label. But in any case, let me see here. Give me just a moment while I look for this. Okay, let me see if I can.
Sometimes it's hard to get a hold of the book.
Yeah, I'm trying to find in the most recent thing. Again, these are most of the stuff he's doing is answering Ubi Petrus's stuff. And so let me see here. Okay, so you sent me something about vaccines.
That's just a list of you can look at various COVID vaccines in which were developed using embryonic kidney cells, etc., and which were tested on it, and which didn't use any of that in the process. It's a very useful list.
Now, people are kind of mentioning, for example, yes, Yasi is super polemical. Well, that's one of the things that I find really kind of hypocritical about post-Vatican II Roman Catholicism. And what I mean by that is that in watching just this part 4 of the Ubi Petros thing, like, he's talking about how this is primarily a Catholic show. Other people are welcome to listen, even if they're not Roman Catholic, to understand their position. But, he's really laying this down to explain this position to Roman Catholics. And my point is that he's like, well, I'm not out to convert anyone. First off, that's in some ways, that's not exactly true. The Roman Catholic apologetical movement is based upon converting people to Roman Catholicism and keeping Roman Catholics from leaving.
But wait. The Pope Francis says no one's allowed to convert. You're not allowed to convert Orthodox.
And exactly. But the point is that, these people just want to leave you if you're Orthodox, they want to leave you in this state where you have no idea what you're talking about anymore, and you end up becoming like Timothy Flanders. The point is that if you can't, I've said this before, apologetics and ecumenism are like oil and water. So you can't mix them together. It doesn't work. Because if you're saying something is the true faith that you are defending, and then ecumenism is teaching that there is no true faith, then frankly you're contradicting yourself. And so I find that most modern Roman Catholic apologists either A, become like Sedevacantists or SSPX or other groups, all these traditionalist groups, because they're just trying to hold it together based on what their official church is saying, or they get into this weird kind of semi like ecumenist mode where it's like, I'm just trying to bring you the truth, brother, and it's almost kind of sickening, because it's kind of like implying that there's a brotherhood where there isn't. The truth is the truth, and you either have it or you don't. And I think it's to quote a Roman Catholic celebrity of fame, Mother Angelica, who reposed a few years back, she said, the greatest act of love you can give is to tell someone the truth. And so I don't like the pretend love that's expressed in a lot of Roman Catholic apologetics, when what they really want is to just say, I want to convert you to the true faith. If you really want to do that, you should just say that. And I think that's more honest.
Atomic Lead had an interesting comment.
Yeah, the problem with e-apologetics is that it tends to end with people equating their opponent with the other said itself. Leads to intellectual laziness and dishonesty for everybody involved. I'm not quite sure I understand what that means. Can you want to jump in on that?
You don't understand it?
Well, I mean, their opponent with the other said itself.
I think he's saying that they kind of construct a false model of what their opponent is saying.
They create like a straw man.
And they don't really have to address everything he's saying, really. So,
well, the easiest way to do that is to confront people directly. But one of the things that a lot of apologetics don't do is they don't confront people directly, or they wait until they have an opponent that looks easy. That sort of thing.
Atomic Lead says he meant the other side.
Oh, the other side. Okay. Well, that's true. That is true. No, that's no problem. But in any case, yeah. The problem is that when you get to that point, if a person is representing the other side, they have to do it accurately. And unfortunately, at times, arguing with Roman Catholic apologists can be like arguing with a Matryoshka doll. Just when you think you've quoted documents from this council or that council, all of a sudden there's some obscure letter that gives the real meaning of what that is. And so now the big thing that everyone's interested is in Gasser's Relatio, because Vatican I by itself sounds horrifying, and nobody wants to admit that.
And I'm confused. What?
Gasser's Relatio was some kind of document that was written by, I think, Archbishop or Cardinal Gasser, which became the official interpretation of how you should read Vatican I.
Who was Cardinal? Was he head of a congregation?
He was like some nuncio. It is the official understanding of Vatican I. Granted, if you read it in full, it's still no better. It's just that it makes people feel better to know that they're kind of reading a more official version of what Vatican I says, but it's not actually changing very much. And so, yes, atomically Bishop Enoch did, which is because he was interested in your point. And that's why I asked what it was, because I did not understand it. But thank you for clarifying. And
Kyle Marx makes a point about, I mean, that's true. I mean, the people tend to forget. And Father Vladimir Guité in his old book, or Abbe Guité, but Father Vladimir Guité in his old book, The Papacy, he brings this out perfectly. The reason St. Leo was so concerned about Canon 28 of Chalcedon was why he was thinking he was overturning, the Nicene canon,
and it was disrespecting other Petrine sees. If you look at
remember also that when St. John Chrysostom, when they falsely deposed him, it wasn't a road deposition. Let's be honest.
No, it was illegal, and he said,
when they had the Synod of the Yoke, I mean, this was like the one that the first or second time they tried to do this to him, because he was exiled like twice.
Yeah.
And if you read, St. Palladius's, dialogue on the life of St. Chrysostom, which people tend to ignore, but is actually very important for a lot of reasons, and the histories of Socrates, and Sozomenus, and Theodoret, and Rufinus, what you find out, I'm sorry, my train of thought is just, I lost my train of thought. I'm not feeling well, but
Continue. I'm trying to remember what I was going to say.
Well, while you're remembering that, I would point out that the sees of Antioch and Alexandria were obviously Petrine sees. St. Leo was clearly offended by Canon 28, which was produced in a later part of the council.
Yes. So what it was is they quoted some of the canons of the 341 Council of Antioch to St. John Chrysostom. I'm just bringing this as a relatable point to St. Leo's objection to Canon 28. St. Chrysostom did not accept the authority of the 341 Council of Antioch. All right. Now, later the church did, okay, because one of those canons says something like, because St. Chrysostom rejected it because he said, well, this council was held with the intention of attacking and deposing St. Athanasius. All right. And there's a debate about that. I think it was used against him. But anyway, and St. Chrysostom's argument was that we can't accept this because of that reasoning. All right. So St. Leo, so different fathers or patriarchs who were fathers objecting to canons of councils because they think they contradict, wider tradition. Even if later the church decides after hundreds of years, no, we don't understand it in that way. That's not necessarily a claim, let's say on St. Chrysostom's part, that he, held universal, power, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So.
Well, now Kyle had said he points out, he says, I'm not trying to argue for you. He thought he had the power to make a canon null and void. I think that what you could say to that is that basically he thought he had the power to vanquish a bad law because, unlike the other canons, because it was not written in the presence of all the council fathers, he was questioning whether its legality. But
I'm not sure. Was it St. Gregory the Great who said, "I'm not sure if anybody is subject to an illegal ruling or something like that"?
Yeah, I think that might have been St. Gregory. But getting back to my original point, St. Leo understood the Petrine See to be triune. So this is a very unique sort of...
And does St. Leo have the understanding that he was to stand up when people are attacking canonical, the canonical rulings of previous councils?
Right.
And he's perfectly, and who more than, the most important of the patriarchs?
The Orthodox Pope of Rome, exactly. Yeah. And so... now it's basically the thing. Well, Atonically, it's basically the thing where Tradcats point out J. Dyer. Why do we do? He's not God. Has sketchy connections. Therefore, all Orthodox are Eurasianists, Gnostic, Kabbalists, etc. Well, the truth of the matter is that J. Dyer has opinions. He does occasional debates. He did a pretty good one with a Muslim. I actually saw that one. He made use of his library for once. Not actually as a good visual, not actually reading it, but the point is that it was it was still well used, and so a lot of people are Cult of Modernism and Atomic Lead have a lot to say about J. Dyer. And,
I'm not interested in that. I'm sorry.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, I feel bad. He's but the point is he does his thing. Okay, and so.
Well, I think we've
So
I'm not going to have a permanent. Hopefully, we're not going to have a continuing of a finale, part 4, part 5, right, Father?
Hopefully not. I don't see us having more than finale part 5, but in any case, we are still trying to get the NFTU channel set up. Again, Elijah Yasi, if he wants to discuss these things on our show, I have no problem with it. I think it would be fine. I'm not exactly sure why we're addressing something for another apologist. I mean, Ubi Petrus is more than capable of answering for himself, and if you have to, go behind a paywall to get it, well, that's really not.
I'm still waiting for the translation of the 1666-67 Moscow Sobor, which is supposed to be posted on Ubi Petrus's website. I remember there's the page. The money raising page, and I'm still waiting for that to happen. So that's that's what I'm waiting for on that one, for the Petrus stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I didn't know that he was putting that up on his website. I don't follow that much. I get updates occasionally on the stuff he did. I know he did a debate with James Lakutis today, which was kind of funny because I debated him 20 years ago, and I guess he let Lakutis talk about the Roman Catholic position, and then I guess Ubi put his position behind a paywall. So on the one hand, I'm sure it is a good argument. On the other hand, you're going to have to pay for it. And I mean, I've seen the quality of his work. It's up to you. It's $5. So, but other than that,
So what is the future for the NFTU channel, Father?
well, if we can get it working, I'd like the NFTU channel to eventually replace this one, where we'll be discussing Orthodox news, events, and we'll even do some apologetics. But the point is, until it's actually approved somehow, it says it's approved in Google, but I can't get it working in StreamYard, and I can't get it working in Restream, then the only other possibility is to put in the man hours to learn OBS and to try to do it ourselves. And if we do that, it'll be a little while, but I mean, we can do it, but it's the most cost-free solution you can find.
Maybe we could do NFTU broadcasts through the YouTube channel, and then just upload them to the Odyssey channel until we get everything worked out.
That was my plan, but unfortunately, it won't. StreamYard, for example, won't even recognize the NFTU channel until the NFTU channel is verified. It's this awful circle where Google's saying it's verified, and StreamYard and Restream are saying it's not.
Right.
And so I'm just waiting to get out of that loop. And as soon as we do, then we will do that.
Code of Modernism says I would pay for the. Well, we did. That was we raised the money for it, and we're still waiting for the publication of the translation. Someone also said they wanted the Stoglaw. Someone contacted me on Facebook and said they would more interested in translation of the 1551 Stoglaw synod, and I said, well, when we get the Moscow one. Now there is a partial translation of the Great Moscow Council 1666, and you can find it in the book, William Palmer's book, Discourses of the Orthodox and Eastern Catholic Church. He does translate like the section in the decree concerning baptisms and chrismations and how to receive Roman Catholics, which actually is an interesting section, even though because of how its interpretation of Apostolic Canons 46 and 50, that's actually kind of interesting about that. Because, Apostolic Canon 46 is the one that says you can't accept the baptisms and sacrifices of heretics, and Apostolic Canon 50 is the one that says if somebody doesn't do triple immersion, but they instead baptize one immersion into the death of the Lord, that's no baptism. And so the explanation given by the Greek patriarchates, because this is the odd thing, we're oftentimes assuming the Greek patriarchates are the ones that baptize everybody, and the Russians, chrismate or confess everybody who becomes Orthodox from like the Latins. But that was not the policy at the time, because it wasn't until 1755, 57 that the Fanar kind of changed its policy on that. But at the 66 Council, or it went into 67, the argument that Patriarch Paisius of Alexandria and Patriarch Macarius of Antioch made to the Russians about why the Russians shouldn't be receiving Latins by baptism was that Apostolic Canon 46, they argue, is actually talking about the Gnostic heretics. That's their argument, and not about the later heretics. So, and that Apostolic Canon 50, because that was how they explained how, let's say, the canons of Constantinople I and others would say the chrismate certain types of Arians, except for the Eunomians and such. That is not contradictory. So I know a lot of people don't like the 1666-67 council, and I mean, there were some things you could probably say that were objectionable about it, but it's interesting just simply for historical reasons and such. And because remember, the Russian Church had a council in 1620, a Moscow council under Patriarch Filaret Nikitich, in which he tried to depose or suspend one of the metropolitans who had received a Polish, I think a Polish princess was marrying a Russian prince, and he chrismated her, and then Patriarch Filaret didn't like it, so he said, from now on, we want to make sure everybody is coming from the Latins is baptized. Now, technically, even before 1620, there were numbers of Cossacks that were flooding across the border into the Tsardom territory, and the Russian policy was everybody's got to be baptized. Because they were saying a lot of these were uniates, or their questioning was that a lot of the even Ukrainian Orthodox have been baptized by triple pouring, and so they didn't accept that.
And that issue was actually also discussed. I mean, the triple pouring issue, the effusion issue, was discussed at the 1667 council. And their argument, the Greek patriarchates, again, were arguing with the Russians about this, saying that, well, triple pouring, I guess, was allowed in the apostolic constitutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, quite, quite acceptable. But anyway, it's interesting from a historical view of economy and why these things were done. So, are you there, Father? Oh, he went mute.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Cult of Modernism asks real quick, which is the synod that dealt with the monarchy of the Father, and the Father is greater than biblical passage.
That's the 1280. Was that the 1280 or 1180 Synod of Constantinople? That actually, okay. If you look in the anathemas and the memory eternals of the Sunday of Orthodoxy, the full list, they actually address that stuff. There's some anathemas and memory eternals, because there's a figure called Constantine the Bulgarian who had his own unacceptable interpretations of that. So I think it's the 1180. I think it was like 1150 or 1180 Synod of Constantinople. So I think the interpretation was that what they said is there were two interpretations. One, well, you have, hold on, what's it called?
Come again?
Do you know the site that has the full anathemas?
Of the Sunday of the oh boy. Let me think, because I know the Synodicon was printed in full by HTM, but the one online is actually less complete, if I remember correctly.
I know where it is. It's the John Sandinopoulos site has the full Synodicon.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah. Here, I'll put it in the link in the comments on the private chat. I'm not on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
But if you go down to that, you can put in the YouTube channel. There are a number of the anathemas that deal with that. I have my YouTube, I have my computer set to dark mode, so I can't really read what he's got written there. It just messes everything up because my eyes are not that great anymore. But if you read through that, you'll find a lot of discussion on that issue. Just too much to go through right now. But.
Yeah, the Canon 28 of it was accepted way before that. Ironically, it's first accepted. I believe it was the Roman Catholics accepted it officially at Lateran I, but that was after they had taken over the sees of Alexandria and Antioch. And
no, it wouldn't be Lateran I was
not Lateran I. I'm sorry.
You're talking about after the Crusaders took over Constantinople.
1215, Lateran III. Sorry.
Yeah, they had no reason to object to it then because they controlled everything.
In Lateran III, they officially put that as Roman Catholic dogma after having taken over those sees and placing Latin patriarchs in those areas. Lateran IV, thank you, 1215. You are correct, Kyle. The post-schismatic Roman Catholicism thing I occasionally forget. Also, the Pseudo Council of 869 also includes that delineation as well. But that wasn't a real council. It was rejected by the Council of 879, so that's neither here nor there. But let's see. Lateran Council 1 was great. It's the other Lateran councils we have an issue with. But let me see here. I meant Lateran 4. You are correct. But in any case, that was the first time that it's accepted in Rome. Although one could make the argument they accepted it in 869, but that's because the quote-unquote patriarchs of Alexandria and Antioch that were there were not really the patriarchs. But
St. Ignatius was at the council, but they never held that against him.
Right.
So, I mean, you can have councils that are attended by Orthodox bishops, and then they just overturn years later because they approve things that. I mean, I might be incorrect, but I don't think at 869 council, I don't think St. Ignatius or any of the bishops there endorsed a heretical position about anything. I think it was
no, they didn't. I
think what happened was they got rid of St. Photius, which was considered unjust, obviously.
Right. And uncanonical because the council was kind of like illegally held. They took pains to make it look legal. That we do know of from the history of Pope Nicholas I. But past that, no.
And remember, after St. Photius, they had Patriarch St. Photius was exiled in like 884, and died in when did St. Photius die? 889, something like that.
Mhm.
And then they had Patriarch Saint Stephen, who was 18 years old after that. I mean, that was the the late 9th and then the 10th century in both Rome and Constantinople were kind of this beginning of this kind of a lot of crazy stuff happened. I mean, people talk about the pornocracy, and that was true in Rome. That was terrible. But then you look at a figure like, well, Saint Stephen was 18 years old, and I think he was a eunuch, but he wasn't bad. He was patriarch for something like 20 years, I think. But then you have Theophi like Lycopanos in the 10th century. He was like a 16-year-old boy that was the nephew of Romanos and the Emperor Romanus, and they made him patriarch, and that was some crazy stuff. Not that I remember, I was obvious. All right, I think we're closing down now, right, Father?
Yes, we are.
All right.
In that case, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions, comments, concerns. We're still trying to make this. We're still trying to make the next channel work. And again, as for Yasi and his friends, they are always welcome to come on our show. And did the Pope ratify 869? The short answer is yes and no. Yes first, no later. Anyway, with that, I'm going to say, good night. Thank you, and thank you, Ludica, for being on. Benedicite.
Benedicite.